Lexus presents tennis on Sky Sports.
Right, there is only one place to start, and that is with Jack Draper and his first quarter-final in a Grand Slam. And who better to have alongside me than Laura Robson and Tim Henman to find out a bit more about Jack Draper. Laura, you know him very well. Let's just go a little bit on the personality side before we get into the tennis and just find out a bit more about him as a character.
Oh, he's lovely. He's such a nice boy. Always comes up and gives you a hug and asks about your family. And I don't know anyone who's got a bad thing to say about him. But yeah, he's a bit cheeky. We have quite a lot of banter between all the British players, and he's not afraid to dish out some abuse when needed. I just think everyone gets along with him. He's such a hard worker, and everyone wants the best for him.
Yeah. Tim, the right kind of temperament then, from the sounds of that, for a tennis player that's trying to win a Grand Slam, trying to get further into the second week of a Grand Slam.
Yeah, most definitely. I think then when you come to the professional side, he's unbelievably hardworking. He's completely committed to every aspect of the sport, and I think he has a real passion for the game. He knows everything about what's going on with the other players, and he's obviously followed someone like Andy Murray growing up, and now with Murray retired, I think it's a great opportunity for him to be certainly leading the men's
He
British
watches
game.
YouTube clips as well from matches from like the 90s and early 2000s. He's just an absolute tennis nerd,
So he knows
and I
all
love
the
that
history,
about him.
yeah.
He's like, he can tell you what point won Andy's first Wimbledon and what shot he hit, and what time of the match that he broke serve, and all these niche little
and I think
facts.
that's great, because then it's never your job. It's always your hobby. It's your passion, and that's where, when you've got to put in the long hours, in the gym or on the track, or traveling away from home, you're prepared to make those sacrifices because you want to be the very best version of yourself.
Do you think he's watched your 1996 first quarter-final in a Grand Slam at Wimbledon?
I reckon he has.
That was in black and white, I think. You'd have to ask him that. I hope not.
But in terms of experience, what do you remember about that being the first time you'd got to that part? That second week of a Grand Slam does make a big difference.
Yeah,
doesn't
it was a steep learning curve. I was probably ranked 60 or 70 at the time, and had only ever won one match at Wimbledon. So to get through to the quarters was, was massively exciting, and I absolutely loved it. I had to play Todd Martin, who was a much better player than me, but it adds to your belief. Once you're through to the quarters, you think, next time I'll get there, I have a little bit more experience, and you obviously want to get through to the semis, and that's where Jack, I think, has done such a good job, because this is new territory, and hopefully he can keep the same attitude.
Yeah, Tim just mentioned belief there, and in a few interviews recently, Jack has talked a bit more about the fact that he thought about not continuing with his tennis career a little bit when he had all of the injuries and everything was going in the opposite direction, or he'd play well and then he would have to stop again because something else happened. How much do you think that belief is back now, that is all behind him?
I almost don't believe that he ever thought about stopping. I mean, he just loves it so much, and he loves to compete that, I feel like that would have been a split-second thought, and then all of a sudden he puts the tennis on the TV and he's right back in it. And so I feel like the belief in his game has just come on leaps and bounds, but that comes because he can trust his body these days. He's not injured anywhere near as much. Yes, he might pick up a few niggles here and there, and he definitely won't feel 100% every day, but he's just learned how to deal with the rigors, basically, of being on tour and the intensity of it, and he's adapted really well.
You mentioned the rigors on tour, and earlier you were talking about the banter and how the British players get on really well. How much do you think it has helped a young Jack Draper, now 22, but on his way up, having Andy Murray around, having Dan Evans, Cam Norrie, and the women players as well, but just having that core group that were travelling and maybe giving him a bit of advice, which he might not need so much of now?
And he's not afraid to ask for it. I like that about him, that he's always curious about what other people have been up to. I'm sure he's asked Andy question after question, and I always remember that clip coming back from Davis Cup.
Yeah.
So I can only imagine the conversations that happened in that car. But yeah, even with Dan and Cam, he's always asking them what they've been up to, and what worked for them against certain players, what tactics. And as he's getting older and being on the tour more often, then you learn your own sort of niches, and I'm sure younger players will start asking him stuff. But yeah, I just think he's got a great relationship with just about everyone in British tennis, but also he's had the same coach for so long that he's always got someone that he can trust off the court as well, knowing that James Trotman's in his corner and he can even ask him.
I was going to say,
does he come to you for advice?
He has done. I had a long chat with him actually after the Australian Open in sort of early February, when he'd had that issue with the cramping, and he was sort of vomiting on court just when he finished that match, and so much of that was, I think, about sort of the anxiety and emotional management of playing 5-set matches. And when you haven't played best of 5 and you get deep in the 4th set and you're thinking, wow, I've not got much left in the tank. It's a physical battle, but it's a mental battle, and I think it's great that he's had people around him that he can seek advice from, but also in the environment there's healthy competition, and I think that's so important, that there are other British players who are on tour having good results, whether it's in the men's game, the women's game, or the doubles players, and there's just a really good positive vibe that you can thrive with.
Well, he's learned very quickly, considering that was this year that he was being sick on court and he had those nerves, and you did say that he struggled with 5-set matches, whereas we potentially could have a 5-set match against Alex De Minaur, a very physical player that you don't imagine Draper's going to have huge issues with in terms of his body and getting through a match.
No, I don't think he will now, and I think he's been fortunate as well. We haven't really had a couple of really hot days, but it's been a lot cooler. But I think again he's got sort of more understanding of the ebbs and flows of 5-set matches. There are plenty of times I can remember playing best of 5 in the second set. You're thinking, wow, I'm cooked, and you get a second wind, and then you start to feel a lot better, and then you'll fatigue a little bit, and it's just having that understanding that you're not going to feel perfectly the whole time through 5 sets, but just being able to work your way through it, keep your concentration, and it's a big challenge against De Minaur. He is a lot more experienced, he's a much higher ranked player, so hopefully Jack can go into that match with a lot of freedom and go for it.
And you both know what the pressures are like at Wimbledon. How much might it help him to be having this run, his best run at a Grand Slam, not there, but actually here at the US Open, where it's a bit of a different atmosphere?
I don't think he'll read too much into that. I'm sure he would want it to be at Wimbledon as well, because it'd have the home crowd. These courts just favour him so much, and they're sort of medium fast. They're quite lively, especially when you play in the day. He's just picking up so many free points off his serve and first ball after that. I don't know that that's even crossed his mind, to be honest. And before you've mentioned it, I hadn't thought about it, because I think you take a quarterfinal wherever it comes at you, and it doesn't really matter where.
Yeah, no, I just worry about the pressure that sometimes are on players when they're at home. We've got that with the Americans here at the US Open, but for British players, obviously, it's like that when you're playing at Wimbledon. The potential for coming through this match and then having a blockbuster of a semi-final is, I know, something that we can talk about.
Yeah.
Maybe he, as Laura's just said, he doesn't really think, no player will be thinking that far ahead. He'll want to just get through this first one, but potentially the world number 1 Jannik Sinner, who is a good friend of his, or you've got Daniel Medvedev, former champion. It doesn't.
Well, we would obviously love to see that, because it would mean that Jack's got through the De Minaur hurdle, which is one of the biggest matches probably of Jack's life, to be in the quarters of the Slam for the first time, playing a top 10 player. But I think De Minaur is someone that Jack's will know his game, and obviously the team will have done their work, and De Minaur has played Evans here. He's played Evans quite a few times, so they played in Davis Cup. Leon Smith's been here, so I'm sure they will have done their analysis, and I think what's important is Jack really goes out there with the game plan of the way he wants to play, the way that he can really implement his game style, because De Minaur's not going to beat himself. Jack's got to go out there and really take it to him and have the belief and hopefully the execution to get the job done.
Well, let's just have a quick word on the other quarterfinal, the potential opponent for Jack Draper or Alex De Minaur, whoever ends up winning. That is a big match, isn't it? Medvedev versus Sinner is one that's just brilliant for tennis fans.
It's going to be interesting. I mean, there's such a contrast in their game styles at the moment, where Jannik is absolutely cracking the ball. Against Tommy Paul, the hitting and the sound of the ball is just so sweet. And for Tommy Paul to go into his press conference and say, actually, Jannik is the best hitter from the back of the court over Alcaraz, to know that that's what the other players are saying about you. I mean, he's got to have so much belief in his game. Meanwhile, Medvedev, for me, is still struggling a little bit on his serve over the last few months. It seems to be going a bit haywire. He's struggling with some double faults, but he outworks a lot of people from the baseline. So, yeah, it's going to be a challenge for both of them. I'm not really sure who I'd go with.
entertainment-wise, they're such brilliant characters as well as such opposite characters that it makes it really entertaining, doesn't it?
Yeah, definitely. I mean, Sinner was very much on the radar at the beginning of this tournament for the wrong reasons with the positive drugs test, whereas, Medvedev, I think, has very much been under the radar. He has won this tournament in the past. He's been in the finals. So these are circumstances and environment that he knows well. For me, it's that ball striking capabilities of Sinner, I think, that will give him the edge. Medvedev's such a good defender, but he does like to sort of play further and further behind the baseline. That kind of opened up the angles for Sinner. But that both players are going to give it everything.
But it's at night. It's at night. I think that changes things again because Sinner wanted to play during the day.
But also then I think that, with Sinner's ball striking, he hits the ball much harder than Medvedev, and therefore if it's slower, then Medvedev's shots probably are less effective. But, these players, they know they've got to make the adjustments. It's the same for both of them. But I think if I had to choose one, I think Sinner will come through.
It is absolutely fascinating, that one. Intriguing contest coming up between Medvedev and Sinner as well in the quarterfinals.